The world's largest banks aren't just storing your savings, they are helping cartels hide billions in plain sight while you struggle to pay your mortgage. If you think a conspiracy is just a story told by people in tinfoil hats, you're about to realize that, for the global elite, it's just a standard, high-margin business model. But before we look at the bankers in their tailored suits, you need to see the custom-made windows designed for the one thing more valuable than gold: pure, dirty, blood-soaked cartel cash. Number 9. HSBC's cartel banking. Imagine you're a drug lord. You have a mountain of cash so large it's literally rotting in your basement. You can't just walk into a local branch with 100 suitcases without triggering every alarm in the building. But between 2006 and 2010, HSBC, a bank with a history stretching back over a century, didn't just look the other way. They built the literal infrastructure for the global drug trade. In Mexico, they didn't have standard bank tellers. They had custom-designed teller windows. Why? Because the boxes of cash the Sinaloa cartel moved were precisely one size. The bank modified their glass partitions so those boxes could slide through effortlessly. It wasn't a bank, it was a high-volume drive-through for the world's most violent criminals. While the Sinaloa cartel was dissolving bodies in acid and terrorizing entire cities, HSBC was busy marking Mexico as a low-risk country for money laundering. That is like calling a Category 5 hurricane a gentle breeze while it's actively leveling your house. They moved at least $881 million in drug money. When the truth finally exploded in 2012, the US government slapped them with a $1.9 billion fine. To you, that sounds like an astronomical number. To HSBC, it represented exactly 5 weeks of profit. Not one executive spent a single night in a prison cell. They didn't even lose their bonuses. For the elite, a $1 billion fine isn't a punishment. It's a license fee to continue the crime. But laundering money is just a logistical game. What happens when the elite stop just moving money and start moving the hearts of an entire nation to start a world war? The answer involves a 15-year-old girl, a scripted performance, and a lie that changed the Middle East forever. Number 8. The Nayirah testimony hoax. In 1990, the world's heart broke for a 15-year-old girl named Nayirah. She sat before the Congressional Human Rights Caucus, her voice trembling, her eyes filled with tears. She told a story that would haunt an entire generation. Iraqi soldiers storming into Kuwaiti hospitals, tearing hundreds of babies out of incubators, and leaving them to die on the freezing cold floor. It was the nuclear bomb of emotional manipulation. President George H.W. Bush repeated the story 10 times in 40 days. It gave America the moral high ground to launch the Gulf War. But here is the ghoulish truth that only came out after the smoke cleared. Nayirah wasn't a random refugee. She was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States. The babies on the floor story? A complete fabrication. A total lie. The entire performance was written, directed, and produced by Hill and Knowlton, a massive PR firm paid $10.7 million by the Kuwaiti government to sell the war to the American public. They used focus groups to find the exact imagery that would bypass your logic and hit your survival instinct. It worked perfectly. The bombs fell, the war was won, and the truth didn't surface until the bodies were already buried. This wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was a $10 million marketing campaign for mass death. Number 7. AT&T's Hemisphere Project. While you were worried about foreign enemies, a corporate giant in your own backyard was turning your private life into a commodity. Since 1987, AT&T has been running the Hemisphere Project. This isn't just a database. It's a massive, digital diary of a nation containing 4 decades of call records. We aren't just talking about who you called. We are talking about where you were, who you were with, and how long you stayed there. They add billions of new records every single day. And AT&T doesn't just store this data for billing purposes. They sell it. They sell access to law enforcement for millions of dollars a year. They even created a process called parallel construction. That's a fancy, legalistic term for lying. It means the police use AT&T's data to catch you, then they pretend they got the information through routine police work so you can't challenge it in court. It's a total bypass of the Fourth Amendment, happening in real time, every time you pick up your phone, but spying is just watching. What if the products sitting in your kitchen right now were actually changing your DNA? There is a chemical in your blood at this very moment that a multi-billion-dollar company knew was toxic 50 years ago, yet they kept selling it to you anyway. Number 6. The secret of Teflon. Back in the 60s, DuPont created a miracle: Teflon. It was non-stick, futuristic, and in every American kitchen. But inside their high-security labs, they were seeing something terrifying. A chemical called Kate was causing rat livers to swell and explode. Did they recall the pans? No. When their own female workers started having babies with one nostril or missing eyes, they didn't stop production. They quietly moved the women to different departments to hide the evidence. They call it the forever chemical because its molecular bond is so strong it never breaks down in nature. By 2000, Kate was found in the blood of 99% of Americans. It is in your tap water, your soil, and your children's toys. DuPont made billions while knowing they were poisoning the chemical composition of the human race. When they were finally caught in 2005, they paid a $16.5 million fine. For DuPont, that was a fraction of 1% of their Teflon profits. They paid the fine, changed the name of the chemical, and kept moving. Number 5. Prohibition poisoning. In 1926, the U.S. government got tired of people ignoring the ban on alcohol. They realized that moral arguments weren't working, so they decided to turn the law into a literal death sentence. They ordered industrial alcohol manufacturers to add lethal amounts of methanol to their products. They knew bootleggers would steal it to make booze. On Christmas of 1926, 23 people in New York City died after drinking a single toast. They didn't just get sick, they went blind, they hallucinated, and their internal organs shut down. By the time Prohibition ended, the U.S. government had successfully murdered over 10,000 of its own citizens through intentional poisoning. They called it law enforcement. We call it a state-sponsored massacre. If the government was willing to poison your drink to prove a point, imagine what they were willing to do to the bodies of children. In the 50s, they started a project so dark, it involved the systemic theft of human remains across 3 continents for a nuclear experiment. Number 4. Project Sunshine. The name was designed to sound innocent, but Project Sunshine was a gothic nightmare. In the 50s, at the height of the Cold War, the Atomic Energy Commission needed to know how nuclear radiation affects human bones. But they didn't just want any bones, they wanted the bones of infants. Because babies absorb strontium-90 like a sponge, their growing bodies were the perfect Geiger counters. The government hired a global network of agents to literally steal body parts from over 1,500 dead babies without ever telling the parents. They harvested remains in Europe, Australia, and across the US. They would ship stolen legs, rib cages, and skulls in unmarked boxes to secret labs. Thousands of parents went to their graves thinking they had buried their children in peace, never knowing their babies had been dismembered for a nuclear experiment. It was a global grave-robbing operation sanctioned by the highest levels of the American government. Number 3. The asbestos company's murder. While the government was stealing bones, corporate giants were making sure their workers never reached old age. In the 30s, executives at Johns Manville discovered that asbestos fibers were tearing up human lungs like billions of tiny glass shards. They had the medical reports. They had the proof. Their response? A memo that read, "The less said about asbestos, the better off we are." They let thousands of men die slow, agonizing deaths, coughing up blood in dark rooms, while the company's executives calculated that the cost of lawsuits would be lower than the cost of safety equipment. It wasn't a business mistake. It was a cold, mathematical execution of a workforce for the sake of a quarterly dividend. When the truth finally came out, they didn't apologize. They filed for bankruptcy to protect their executives' retirement funds, while the widows of their workers got nothing. But the asbestos cover-up was localized. What if I told you that a single corporate decision in the 20s lowered the intelligence of the entire human race by 7 IQ points? The culprit isn't a secret, it's in the very air you've been breathing for a century. Number 2. The leaded gasoline conspiracy. In the 20s, General Motors and Standard Oil had a problem. Their car engines were knocking. Their solution was tetraethyl lead. There was just one problem. Lead had been known as a deadly neurotoxin since the time of the Romans. In their loony gas-building factory, the truth was impossible to ignore. Workers were jumping out of windows, screaming at imaginary demons, and collapsing into violent convulsions. 15 men died in absolute agony during the first few months. Did the company stop? No. They blamed the victims. They said the workers had poor hygiene or were partying too hard at night. They hired a scientist named Robert Kehoe, who spent the next 50 years lying to the public, claiming that lead in the air was natural and healthy. It wasn't until a scientist named Claire Patterson, the man who actually calculated the age of the Earth, proved that lead levels in humans had surged 625 times since the introduction of leaded gas. By then, it was too late. Every single person born between 1950 and 1980 lost an average of 7 IQ points because of leaded exhaust. We literally made an entire generation of the human race demonstrably dumber so that oil companies could avoid a cheaper, safer alternative. The very chemical composition of our brains was changed for a profit margin. We've witnessed the systematic poisoning of our blood, our bones, and our very minds. But the number one conspiracy on this list isn't just a ghost of the past. It's unfolding right now, in real time, hiding inside your own medicine cabinet. This silent betrayal has already claimed more American lives than the entire Vietnam War. And the truth behind it? It's far more sinister than you can imagine. Number 1. The opioid company conspiracy. Purdue Pharma didn't just sell a painkiller, they sold a death sentence. They told every doctor in America that OxyContin was abuse-proof and that the addiction rate was less than 1%. They knew their drug was nothing more than chemical heroin in a pill. They even created savings cards to give patients their first 30-day supply for free, literally using the first hit is free strategy of a street corner drug dealer. When patients started dying by the thousands, Purdue's executives didn't pull the drug. Instead, they invented a psychological weapon, pseudo-addiction. They told doctors that if a patient seemed addicted, they actually just needed a higher dose. They made $35 billion while fueling the worst drug epidemic in human history. When the law finally caught up, the Sackler family moved their billions offshore and used the bankruptcy courts as a shield. They traded hundreds of thousands of American lives for a private yacht and a clean escape. Data teaches, but these stories should make you feel a deep, cold realization that conspiracy is often just another word for history we haven't declassified yet. From the bones of stolen babies to the lead in your brain, the receipts are finally here. The only question left is, what is being hidden today at this very moment that your grandchildren will find shocking in 50 years? Is it the food, the social media algorithms, or something even darker? If this video made you question everything you thought you knew, hit the subscribe button right now. We don't do theories here. We deal in the declassified truth. Share this investigation with someone who still thinks the world is just a series of coincidences. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and I'll see you in the next investigation.